Hey book besties, welcome to another bookish video. I am a little bit nervous, but I'm going to be talking about the quote-unquote worst books that I read in 2023 and just generally books that I was excited for that let me down, that were disappointing in my opinion. Before we get into the books, obviously book opinions are completely subjective. I may like a book that you don't like, and I may not like a book that you absolutely adore, which is one thing I really love about reading, is that everyone's opinions and reading experiences are so different. So please take my opinions and this video with a grain of salt, because these are just my reading experiences reading these books. So yeah, let's talk about the worst aka disappointing books that I read in 2023. If you guys want to hear about the best books that I read of this year, I have already posted that video, so go check that out. But today we're going to be talking about the disappointing, not so good reads. Okay, let's start off with the elephant in the room, The Spanish Love Deception by Elena Armas. This was probably the book that had been on my TBR for the longest. I can see why I had been putting it off, is all I'm gonna say. I rated this one 2 stars when I read it. First of all, this did not need to be 500 pages long. Also, the chapters are really long. Like, some chapters would go for like 20 to 30 pages and I'm like, why? The concept of this book sounds really good, I will say. So we're following like enemies to lovers, fake dating, a vacation to Spain, a wedding that's set in Spain, and workplace romance, like tropes that are usually really good. And it's a slow burn, but I feel like the slow burn in this book was too much. Enemies to lovers, they're not really enemies, no. Also, the main female character, Catalina, bugged me so much. She annoyed me throughout the entire story, and this book is only in her perspective, so you can imagine how the reading experience was like for me. Also, it took 200 pages for them to even reach Spain, and I'm like, why did it take that long? Like, why? I don't know. And once they did get to Spain, I was like, okay, maybe it's gonna get better. No, it did not get better. It was a shocker that I did not DNF this book, because it was so boring. I could not care what happened to these characters, if they ended up together, whatever. It was just so boring, and the writing was just, it was not my cup of tea. And I actually do have the second book, The American Roommate Experiment, on my TBR. Like, I actually own the book on my bookshelf, and I'm so nervous to pick it up because of how much I did not enjoy The Spanish Love Deception. And it was just so, it was so disappointing, because it had potential to be great, but it was just a flop when I read it, unfortunately. Another miss for me was Chase Me by Tessa Bailey. This was also another 2-star read for me. This is the first book in the Broke and Beautiful novel. We follow our main character, Roxy, who is like an aspiring actress. She is an aspiring, struggling actress living in New York. And we follow Louis, who is like this big hotshot lawyer. He's like rich. And this is very much like lust-based. There's no romantic connection with these 2 characters. This is also very spice heavy, but I will say the spice in this book is good if that's kind of what you're into. I just could not care, again, if these characters ended up together. It was just boring. I don't think I would continue on with the series, because the rest of the series is following Roxy's roommates, and I didn't really care about them either, so I probably wouldn't be investing my time into the rest of the books. Then we have Desperate Measures by Katie Roberts. This is the first book in the Wicked Villain series. I think this is what the series is called, but this is a dark romance. It's a dark Disney reimagining. It's actually following Jasmine from Aladdin and Jafar. So obviously it's different to your typical Disney retelling reimagining situations. Very spicy. It's spicy from the very first page, basically. This book gave me the ick, honestly. The specific descriptions in this book was just not it. And I did not like the spice. I did not like the storyline. This was a pain to read and get through, but it is less than 300 pages. But this is pure spice, no plot. Do with that information what you will, but I personally did not enjoy it, and also another series that I will not continue. Then I have Ramon and Julieta by Alana Quintana Albertson. This is a Romeo and Juliet retelling, reimagining in modern day time. Book is surrounding food, a lot of food talk, so that was interesting. I mean, I'm a big foodie and I love food in books, so that was probably the only good thing about this book, the food talk. But I can't even remember too much about the story. I mean, obviously it's a reimagining, but it's boring. I mean, obviously it's very insta-lust based. There's not really love between these two characters, but I could not care about these two characters, whether they ended up together, what happened to them. This book was just cringe. The writing was very cringy for me. The spice was very cringy. The characters were very two-dimensional and boring, and I could not care for this book. I think I rated this one like 2.5 stars when I read it, and it's honestly a book that I completely forgot that I even read because it was just so mundane. Then we have The Enemy Trap by Mariam. This cover is absolutely stunning, and the inside pages are actually beautiful. Like, they are so pretty, but the book has accidental pregnancy. That's all I'm gonna say. Like, I'm not a fan of the accidental pregnancy trope. It is also a sports romance, but the sports romance really took a back seat. It was not in the forefront at all. It was just mainly very focused on the accidental pregnancy side, and I believe this had either marriage of convenience. I think it was more fake marriage than marriage of convenience, but yeah, accidental pregnancy is the entire plot of this book. So I do not like the accidental pregnancy trope, so obviously naturally I did not enjoy this book, but I really love this cover. This cover is so beautiful that it makes me not even want to like get rid of this book because the cover is stunning. Okay, these three books, I wouldn't classify them as like the worst books that I read, but these books were like really hyped up, and ones that I was like highly anticipating, that I thought I was going to be obsessed with. That was just disappointing. So these were more in the 3-star range, but I just wanted to mention them because I was so hyped for these books and they let me down completely. First up is possibly controversial, Every Summer After by Carly Fortune. I was very hyped for this book because of how popular this was like last summer, as in like last year, but this book just did not hit for me. I did not like how the book ended. I did not like the closure that we got towards the end, or like the resolution. I also honestly believe Sam, I think that was his name. Yeah, Sam, he deserves so much better than Percy. I honestly enjoyed the writing. That was really good. It's also Childhood Friends to Lovers and Second Chance Romance, then in our perspective. It's very similar to Love in Other Words, which I also read this year, and I liked that book, but this one really fell flat for me, mainly towards the end because of the trope that was introduced towards the end. I'm just not a big fan of that, and I just did not like how the book was resolved. No, this would not be a book that I would say is the worst books or even coming close to the worst books, but it's just a book that really disappointed me when I read it. Same with You've Reached Sam by Dustin Thau. I was really excited to read this book because of how hyped this one was on Book Talk again. Like, everyone was raving about this book, and this book cover is also so stunning, but I just did not connect to this book, and I think that's probably why I did not enjoy the story, because I didn't really connect to this story. But the concept was really interesting because we follow Julie and Sam, and they were completely in love, and they were about to like graduate college and start their entire lives together, and then Sam passes away, and then Julie, you follow her grieving process, but one day she picks up the phone and she calls Sam just to kind of hear his voicemail, but then he actually picks up the phone, and it's kind of like this magical realism situation, which that concept sounds really interesting, but it just I didn't connect to it as much as I thought I was going to, which was really disappointing because I had very high hopes for this book, thinking I was really going to enjoy it, but then just didn't hit for me, unfortunately. It was a 3-star read and probably a book I would still like say, hey, give it a shot, but like, it did disappoint me. The last book that I have to mention was also really sad because I really enjoyed the first book, and that book I actually ended up including in my best books of 2022 video that I did last year. I was so hyped for the sequel, especially with how the first book ended, but the second book disappointed me, and that is The Dragon's Promise by Elizabeth Lim. I was so excited to read this book. I even reread Six Crimson Cranes before I read The Dragon's Promise because I was so wanting to be fully invested into this world again, but this book just really disappointed me. First of all, it was way longer than it should be. I didn't like the first half of the book when our main character was in the dragon world. I was like, no, that was so boring to me. And then like the second half was like a different plot, so you kind of follow two different plot lines, not different plot lines, but two different stories into one. I don't know, I can't really explain it without accidentally spoiling the book, but I will say Six Crimson Cranes is so worth the read, but The Dragon's Promise did not live up to what I expected in my head after reading Six Crimson Cranes. So this one was quite a disappointment for me, especially like seeing how the relationships between some characters also changed as well. Like, I was just kind of expecting more, and this book just did not give. Kind of wish that I just didn't read the second book and the book just ended with Six Crimson Cranes, because this was unfortunately disappointing. Oh, I just realized I cannot believe I forgot to mention this book before before because I don't have the physical copy with me. Shelby actually has it because she really wanted to read it after I told her about how much I despised this book. And that is To Love Jason Thorne by Ella Mays. This is probably my, I don't want to say hated, but like the worst book that I read in 2023. I read this back in Jan or Feb, I think, and it was the worst thing ever. I am shocked that I did not DNF that book, honestly. I don't know why I continued to read that book despite how much it gave me the ick. The entire book was the biggest ick. Like, the thought of that book just makes me like, no. Was not a vibe. That was A Marriage of Convenience and Brother's Best Friend. And so the main character Olive is a best-selling author and her book is actually being turned into a movie. And the guy that's gonna be acting in this movie is Jason, who is Olive's childhood crush, who was her brother's best friend, and she's basically loved him since she was 8 years old, and he's a couple years older. And also there were 2 scenes in this book where there was just like no consent, and I was like, why? I don't understand why that was kind of included in the book, and it just gave me the ick. Also, Jason's nickname for Olive was Little One, and like, take a shot for every time he would nickname her and call her Little One, because it gave me the absolute ick. I think that is like one of the nicknames that I just can't stand in books, is Little One, especially considering like they've known each other since they were kids, and like he was a few years older and like she had a crush on him. Like, no, I can't. And also the book is in dual POV, but the entire time on Olive's perspective, her as an adult still sounded like she was the 8-year-old child, and I was like, I can't take this book seriously. Like, this entire book just feels like a joke. I don't know. I was not a fan of this book. It was the worst book that I read this year, and I do not recommend. It was a 1-star read. It was the only book that I rated 1 star. Do with that information what you will. Anyways, that concludes this video talking about the worst books and the most disappointing reads that I had in 2023 this year. I did this video last year and you guys really seem to like it, but every time I think about doing this video, I always get really nervous because obviously everyone's book opinions are so different, but obviously that is what makes a reading community so interesting and so fun. Let me know if you agree or disagree with any of these opinions, because I would be very, very interested to know. Give this video a huge thumbs up if you enjoyed watching, and make sure you go check out the best books that I read in 2023 for books that I just absolutely love this year. And also subscribe to my channel down below because I post new videos every single week, and I will see you all in my next video. Bye!